Okay, so welcome to another episode of whatever. I don't think we've even thought of a name for the podcast because
I know I was geeked out and you were cheeseburgers,
and that's probably going to change now.
Our pop culture review channel, as if YouTube doesn't have enough of them.
Look, we'll in subsequent correspondence we will figure out a name, and that will be on the new channel. So the audience probably already knows it before we do.
We'll get a niche.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk about the new Joker film. Well, not quite new. It did come out last year in August, September. And I remember when I was recommending this film to you, and I was urging you to watch it because you were in your typical habit of watching comic book films in a belated way, just waiting to the last minute.
When it's on DVD.
And I really want to know what your... Well, I know what your reaction is, but I'd like you to share your reaction with the audience and sort of tell me why it is that film had the impact that it did on you, and we can sort of go through the nooks and crannies of why we both loved it so much.
No worries. Well, it came out during the second half of 2019, and you kept saying, just let the wife look after the kid and go to the cinema. Well, I didn't get round to that, but when we went to New Zealand over January, I got to see 3/4 of the Joker on the aeroplane. So I had to wait until the end of my holiday, flying back, and it was a slightly longer flight, and I started it early, right at the beginning, just straight after the safety briefing. I was watching it. I watched it again from the beginning, all the way through, and wow. I mean, that was a film, even partially watched, it stayed with me all throughout my holiday, and I was thinking about it. Even when I'm in, beautiful New Zealand, looking at the snow-capped mountains, in the back of my mind, I'm looking forward to thinking, I'm going to see the rest of Joker. So that's a pretty impactful film.
The thing that struck me after watching it was how tense the film was. A month ago or so, I ended up watching 1917, that World War II film, and it was that...
World War One.
So, sorry, World War One. I in my head, I said World War One, and I was like, yeah, it's World War One. In the World War One film, the funny thing was, I said, oh, there's a Nazi in the film, and there was just a German, just a casual German. But when I was watching that, it had that one shot, and I felt that same tension. Funny thing is, the Joker maintains the ability to sort of evoke that tension throughout the film without relying on that shtick. It was combined. It was just how that character was abused every time he was on screen. Sort of the empathy generated for that character. It's very similar to. I always say, watching someone be humiliated and shamed, it doesn't matter who it is. Our natural human instinct is to feel sympathy for that person.
Yeah, you want to see them come out on top somehow.
Exactly. So when you saw, say, Cersei in Game of Thrones get crap flinged on her,
and she was humiliated by the religious fanatics,
yeah,
you felt for her.
Yeah, you felt for her, even though she was the most ghastly character, and arguably more ghastly and inhumane than the forces of darkness in that show. You still felt sorry for them. I think that's compounded by the fact that Joaquin Phoenix his character was not even a bad person. He was just this slightly try-hard, working class dude, lower working class, looking after his mum, and every aspect of him that I think mainstream media found pathetic and indicative of...
Well, he wasn't even working class. He was underclass.
He was underclass.
Semi-welfare, semi-employed with his, clown job. And, yeah, he was just the ultimate underdog because, let's face it, he's a ward of the state and, then he's adopted and abused, but he doesn't know about it.
Yeah.
So he's zero.
At the start, I think the start of the film really... sort of really encapsulated for me what the sort of the world view was. You had Arthur Fleck stand up and say in his imagination of him being on that Tonight Show version of the Tonight Show, say that he's a working man He loves his mum, and he's a breadwinner. And it was every step of this film demonstrating to you how the society around him wasn't giving him that capability to be a breadwinner. And any time he tried to pursue that social mobility or any sense of status, it was this gut punch, it's this spit in the face.
He was neutered.
He was castrated every time, and a lot of the time it was just it was uncalled for and it was undeserved. And when that scene where he was being bullied and harassed by these two Wall Street asses that were big twist, these employees, big shots that worked for the Wayne Enterprise. And I found when those two characters got shot, I don't think anybody reasonable, anybody being honest with themselves, thought that they sympathized with those people. In my
what about
theater,
when he chased Fatty and shot the third one?
I think at that point it's sort of that Walter White effect. We understand the causality of how that character got to that point, and so he's almost a force. He's almost this tidal wave. Well, this is what happens when you beat someone down to this point. We just have to watch the madness unravel, and it was just how he was
taking it, and then he finally decided to lash out,
and it was
instinctively
beautiful.
For survival.
Yeah,
and then it was less instinctively. It was more lashing out for revenge.
How did you feel at those points emotionally? 'Cause I'm interested as to what your level of empathy or sympathy is, and sort of why you're empathetic. How did you feel when he was killing people that were getting in his way, that were treating him like crap? At the start of the film, I think it was kind of insinuated that he was being sexually assaulted by one of his co-workers.
Big clown, you're my boy.
Yeah, you're my boy. Yeah, so that to me, I felt, he's being victimized in this way. How did you feel at all those points when he was lashing out? Like, was it like, I hope he shouldn't have done that, or
see, the Wall Street jerks, that was like the ultimate revenge fantasy setup. So, when that happened, you just cheered. The other, when his mates visited him, and he got payback on his colleague for ratting him out over the gun and stabbed him in the eye with the scissors. That was painful.
That was scary as well, because he hadn't had all the makeup on. He almost looked like this phantom at that time. It was very eerie.
He does that kill, and then he does the iconic dance down the stairs straight afterwards.
Well, what about when he, spoiler alert, shoots Robert De Niro?
Yeah, Murray.
Rupert Pupkin from the last, was it Last King of Comedy or the King of Comedy?
Yeah, well, you know what? That was his point where he didn't expect to walk off that TV set a free man. He knew he was going down. He didn't expect to get away, He shot him. I mean, originally it was, is he going to shoot himself live on television, or is he going to shoot Murray?
Because that has happened on TV where people attempt to burn themselves alive and all
a big
all that
protest, that sort of thing. So it was an evolving thought, like he dresses up as a clown, but then he says, this is nothing to do with those protests. But the more they discussed it, the more he felt, that
type of
he was making a political statement.
Yeah.
And so, to be perfectly honest, in some ways, the Joker, the character himself, he was making it up as he went. It was a plan that was really fluid, and that's made it a bit exciting because it was unpredictable.
I think the theme running through, or one of the 100 themes running through,
a lot,
was about the income disparity and how this sort of sounds like a political podcast.
What? That's what Batman is.
Yeah.
So they're going about, Batman is a unique superhero because he doesn't have superpowers, and so the world that Batman inhabits it's more of a cartoon true crime. And so DC Comics started off, it's Detective Comics. Batman's the world's greatest detective, and who does he who does he go up against? He goes against the world's greatest criminals. And so he's different from Superman, which has that science fiction and alien element. This can be really grounded in, the gritty underbelly of society, and the themes of Law and Order are very much to do with the haves and the have-nots. It's a theme that's as old as time. You look at, you go back to the underclass in England in the 18th century.
French Revolution.
They become the convicts, and they're unjustly punished just for wanting to survive. And so that's a theme that's gone throughout all the centuries until now. And so the city out of control. And so, with the Batman dynamic, you can look at Batman, he's the savior, but you could also flip it around and look at the villains. And, from a certain point of view,
Batman.
The villains are the heroes, and Batman represents everything that's wrong with society because he's the rich man.
So
he's the billionaire.
I was about to. It's funny you say that, because I was about to say that the fact that he's a billionaire in some way means he's sort of concentrated wealth that could have gone into the hands of somebody else, and because he's the one who has got that...
He didn't work for it.
He didn't
work.
Inherited it. He inherited it, which is probably the most... no one complains about it, but I think everybody sneers about it when somebody inherits their way into...
How did the Wayne family get all that money? Did they own slaves 200 years ago?
Yeah, well, in this day and age, you have to be... There has to be some level of exploitation to get to that level. And even if it's not directly exploiting sweatshops in China or whatever it happens to be, it's still...
taking
advantage through what? Financial speculation on Wall Street or whatever it happens to be. You're still playing that dirty game.
Who can Joe Average relate to more? Billionaire vigilante or someone like Arthur?
What's funny about that is the previous conception of Batman and the criminality has been, everybody, it has been sort of the media representation of crime. We all see criminals on TV, we hate them, and so whenever...
They've all got a sob story as well.
That's the point. Like, they've all got a sob story, but we loved it when they were being beaten the crap out of, because we've all had that experience where we walk down the street and we think, okay, I gotta put the keys through my knuckles just in case there's this group of people who are being overly loud and rambunctious are gonna cross the road and give me some trouble. Like, we've all had that experience, and so I feel like the Nolan films, they didn't play on economy, an economy of disparity at all. It was all these, incoherent ideas about chaos, almost fantastical that a character like the Joker would come out of nowhere and say, I'm this agent of chaos. Chaos is beautiful. And, we liked that because it was a really interesting performance. But politically, it doesn't really say much. It's a
caricature.
Yeah, it was a it's a caricature. It was a sort of in many ways, compared to this Joker, you sort of see it as not really three-dimensional, because that character didn't even have a backstory. Heath Ledger's Joker was a cipher of every villain that we've had, but with this interesting accent and some makeup on.
I feel that now the Joker has as interesting a backstory as Batman. And the fact that they intertwine, at least in this film, in this universe with Thomas Wayne, that makes it all the more powerful.
I love this film, and I think, that being said, I don't think I could watch it again, just because of how tense it was. If I were to watch, say, I don't know have you watched Valkyrie with Tom Cruise? Yeah. So knowing what happens at that film, that everything fails, even though I do like the build up and they're going to kill Hitler, there was that thing. I felt I can't watch that film again because I know of the downfall, and it's not going to be how I expect.
Some moments you can only watch once, and it has that tense impact. Some moments you can watch twice. You can watch Fight Club twice and get blown away by it each time, because the first time you're watching Fight Club, it's amazing.
Second time you've got the context.
Second time you're understanding, my goodness,
I didn't spot
Brad
this.
Pitt is an imaginary friend, and you're understanding how, when all the characters are reacting to Edward Norton and Brad Pitt, they're only seeing Edward Norton.
That is crazy.
So, yeah, you can only watch it the first time
They have that moment in
way.
this film
Then
as well.
Second way, yeah. But yeah. So those sort of films that have those big reveals and big oh yeah moments. Yeah, you don't get that again and again and again unless you've got some form of amnesia.
They had that moment in this film when he thought the Zazie Beetz character was his girlfriend. And he just conjured that story in his... I honestly don't think that they needed that flashback. I thought it would have been 10 times more impactful if her reaction was, what? What are you doing in here? And then as soon as she said that, everyone in the audience went, oh no. Like, they realized that she wasn't his girlfriend.
It was too good to be true. Too good to be true. Because the fact they're setting him up as a loser, and the fact of the matter is, I know Hollywood always casts actresses that are way too attractive.
She was out of his league.
She was out of his league, and so they could have either cast somebody who was in his league. Hollywood, I don't know. I don't think Hollywood hires actresses who actually look like, a poor single mum, a real poor single mum.
Yeah. Which is funny. Yeah.
Knowing that it was a fantasy made me really think, this film is no longer... That was before I knew that the girlfriend was a fantasy. I thought, there's a Hollywood moment in this film, a moment where Hollywood's showing that it's detached from reality. Then, when it was revealed that yes, this was all in his mind, that was a powerful moment because that made me realize, no, this is not just silly Hollywood. They've thought about this. This is entirely realistic. That he finds someone attractive in his apartment and he's having fantasies about being with that person. What's the most chilling part of that is, though, she says, I need you to leave my apartment. I've got a daughter. You don't see her at all after that moment.
Yeah. So
what happened to her?
I think the director had said that they'd survive, but I wanted him to say no. I wanted him to say no because at the end of the film,
the footprints with the other.
I only realised that after I watched a breakdown, but I didn't pick it up. I thought, this is just some flair. This is just some, some weird, type of, literary device, whatever. What does this say?
He's meant to transform from sympathetic to truly vicious.
Truly vicious, that he stomped her to death. And so I felt like it would have been keeping with that if he had killed her.
Well,
but I thought if he had done that,
interpretation.
If they had shown that, I don't think
you wouldn't have liked him.
There would have
been people who just switched up and went, "I'm done.
I don't want to watch it.
Yeah,
I don't want to watch it."
Guy.
So maybe he didn't kill them. But the director said, "Well, he doesn't kill people who have wronged him." All right, okay. I think that's fair. Just probably last point. What did you like? What did you think of the media's reaction to this? Because I thought this film was a little unorthodox because typically, we all know the cliche of Oscar bait, which is, you play a character that is experiencing a mental illness or is LGBTQ or, there is a movie about slavery. Yeah, that's
There's certain roles which are guaranteed to get you noticed by the Academy, and certain roles which...
Not that there's anything wrong with that aspect, but class has always been something that I feel that they've never
you play
really
a disabled person, Oscar nomination.
Yeah. So I don't. Well, how did you sort of think? What did you think about the media's negative reaction towards the film?
The hype was inevitable after the Batman shooting in the cinema, and that just goes to show that again the Batman villains are not. They're comic book characters, but they're also true crime villains because they're grounded in reality. They don't have superpowers, even though their schemes, especially in the comics, are over the top. They're still meant to be just a criminal, which a mere mortal can become this person. So you're always going to get the wannabes and the imitators. And unfortunately, in America, with their gun culture, it doesn't take much to inspire a sick person, to want to shoot people. That being said, the biggest legacy of Joker is people dancing down a bunch of steps in the Bronx. That's great. That's great. But there's an anxiety in America, which we don't particularly understand in Australia, to do with gun culture, to do with what incites or inspires somebody. And I know we've had these debates, do with video games, do violent video games make someone into a mass shooter? what inspires somebody. I would have to say that, at this point in history, the character of the Joker is a bit dangerous. He's dangerous. He's not like, no one's going to run around and pretend, oh, I'm Magneto, because you look like an idiot. But, paint yourself like a clown and being a criminal. How many serial killers did that? Wasn't it John Wayne Gacy or something like that?
He has a lot of cred, and a lot of respect, both for his viciousness and now that, I can understand the point that because you've added an empathetic dimension to this character, he's even more, alluring as a type of ideal role for, people who are, messed up to copy.
Their banner, their flag,
it's their emblem. Yeah. But I think for a lot of crime, I'm not just saying this, but to make myself feel good. But I remember when I was studying criminology, it was very difficult to find a framework that said something along the lines of class played no role in why people commit crime. And the image you get from this is all the social ills is because of social deprivation. It's because of a lack of money, a lack of, people not owning things, and any moral decline.
There's plenty of people, if they were put in a different environment, they might have turned into someone completely different. And that goes down to the most infamous people in history. All the way down to Hitler. Look at Hitler. He could have been an obscure little European artist, but World War I comes along, the Treaty of Versailles comes along, the perfect environments for fanaticism and for the rise of right-wing extremism. I don't know, are some of these people destined to become that way, or is a monster made, or are they destined?
And on that point...
Before we finish, there's one last thing I would like to talk about, and that's the visual aesthetic of this film. And I think that was incredibly important. The fact that it was not set now. Joker would not be the same film if it was set in the 21st century. The fact that it was set in it's meant to be about 1981. But when you look at it, it looks like a New York film from the 1970s. Now, New York films from the 1970s are their own sort of period. It's its own genre. They're like... They go on about film noir films from the 1940s. Well, in the 70s, they had this sort of renaissance of dark, gritty, New York films and crime films. And this sort of taps into that. Like, there's been a lot of comparisons with Taxi Driver and, the Scorsese.
So that steamy sort of concrete...
Night in the city,
yeah.
You got the big cars, the big American cars and things like that. But I think that was important as well, because if ever there was an era in Hollywood cinema where they weren't afraid to show reality the way it was, to show it as ugly and grim and dirty, it was that period in the 1970s when the big Hollywood system had sort of gone and the independent films were being made, and suddenly censorship has gone. And so, like, films in the 1950s or from the late 60s, they started to change. By the 1970s, a 1970s film is almost unrecognisable from the golden age of Hollywood. And so you get these low-budget independent films which address themes that they'd never been able to directly tackle in the past. They'd hinted at it, in the past in old films, but they directly, addressed it. And so you've got yourself films, primarily set in New York City. They represent, they show the poor, it's ugly. You've also got the rise of leading men who are not the typical look. And so this sort of coincides again with this 1970s independent film movement. They don't have the traditional, 6'2" leading man who's got perfect teeth. These were ugly little guys, and they're short. You got Dustin
Joe
Hoffman.
Pesci.
And you got Al Pacino. I was just watching Panic in Needle Park, which was about heroin addicts. It was made in 1971 in New York. And you got Robert De Niro. You've got Gene Hackman. These guys, they look like Joe Average. They've become iconic, but they don't really have that sort of handsome, pretty boy Hollywood look. And so that's why I like the fact that Joker was set in that world. And Joaquin Phoenix also, his physical appearance, you know, he
very
didn't
lanky
look-
and
yeah, but
almost like a golem type
he almost
figure.
looked like an actor who could be from back then. You know, he looked like he fit that brand. And so I was so impressed with how they recreated that aesthetic. You know, because there's plenty of films, they set them in the past. Oh, let's make a film in the 60s. We'll stick in a whole lot of popular music and put in a token hippie.
But it still has the
And
sense.
it looks like it's from now.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't. It looks like they're play acting the past, and it's very rare that you get a film that captures the essence, the aesthetic, the mood of a period, and is not contaminated by the modern time that it's made in.
It'll be interesting to see if the new Wonder Woman, which is set in the 80s,
80s aesthetic.
can live up to that. I'm looking forward to it just from the trailer. The music alone was, ooh, like we're back. You
Yeah,
know,
we're back.
even though I was born in the 90s, but
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I still am young.
No,
enough
but you
to
can
have that
tell. You
80s
can
feel.
read an era.
Yeah.
And modern films that are set in the recent past, it's hit and miss whether they can capture that look. But honestly, Joker took me back in time. You know, it took me back to, you know, all those Scorsese films. It took me back to early bloody Sesame Street, which is set in Europe.
And on that note, I think we'll say goodbye. See ya.
Over and out.